Layla sat alone in her dimly lit apartment, staring at the rain trickling down the window. The silence was suffocating. Just a year ago, she had a husband who whispered promises of forever. Now, those promises were nothing but echoes of betrayal. He had left her for her best friend, shattering her trust and leaving her to pick up the pieces of a life she no longer recognized. She needed an escape, something far from the memories that haunted her. Without hesitation, she packed her belongings and moved to an old countryside house, isolated from the world. The house was worn but held a strange charm, surrounded by thick woods and whispers of forgotten stories. It was exactly what she needed, a place where no one knew her pain. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, she found solace in the quiet. She spent hours wandering the forest, losing herself in the rhythm of nature. One evening, while exploring a narrow, rocky path, her foot slipped, sending her tumbling down into a hidden cave. Her breath caught as she landed on the damp ground, surrounded by walls covered in ancient markings. A faint glimmer in the corner caught her eye. Brushing away the dirt, she uncovered an old, dust-covered lamp, its surface engraved with unfamiliar symbols. It looked centuries old, yet something about it felt alive. A strange warmth spread through her fingertips as she traced the patterns. Without thinking, she wiped away the dirt, and the moment she did, the air around her shifted. A deep hum vibrated through the cave, and a thick blue mist erupted from the lamp, swirling into the shape of a towering figure. Layla stumbled back, her heart hammering against her ribs. The figure solidified into a man, tall, broad-shouldered, with piercing golden eyes that seemed to hold centuries of untold stories. His presence was overwhelming, ancient yet captivating. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, in a voice smooth yet commanding, he said, "You have freed me." Layla could barely form a thought, let alone speak. Had she hit her head too hard? Was this a dream? The man, or whatever he was, watched her with quiet amusement. "I am Azar," he continued, his voice echoing through the cave, "bound to this lamp for 3,000 years. And now, I am at your service." She swallowed hard. "You're a Jinn?" The word felt foreign on her tongue, something out of bedtime stories and myths. Azar nodded. "And you, Layla, are my new master." Her name on his lips sent a strange shiver down her spine. But this wasn't a fantasy, it was real. The weight of it pressed down on her as she realized what she had done. She had freed something ancient, something powerful, and her life would never be the same again. Layla paced in her small living room, stealing glances at the towering figure standing near the window. Azar remained still, his golden eyes studying her with unreadable intensity. Everything about him defied logic. The way his presence filled the room, the quiet power in his stance, the aura of something far older than she could comprehend. "You don't seem surprised," he finally said, his voice smooth but laced with curiosity. Layla exhaled sharply. "I don't know what I am. Maybe I've lost my mind." A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. Madness and truth often walk together. She wasn't ready for riddles. "So, how does this work? Do I get 3 wishes?" Azar's expression darkened. "It is not that simple. Wishes come with consequences. And I am not some fairy tale genie." Something in his voice made her pause. "You were trapped for 3,000 years. Why?" He turned away, staring out the window as if seeing something far beyond the present. "Betrayal," he said after a long silence. "Once I was a prince. Loved, revered. But love is a fragile thing when mixed with power. The woman I trusted most conspired against me, sealing me in that lamp to take my throne. My name faded, my existence reduced to a myth." Layla felt an unexpected ache in her chest. Betrayal. She knew that wound all too well. Azar faced her again, his expression unreadable. "And what of you, Layla? What brought you to an empty house, far from the world?" She hesitated. "Love," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "I gave my heart to a man who promised forever. He broke that promise with my best friend. For the first time, Azar's gaze softened. Humans betray as easily as they breathe, she scoffed. So do Jinn, apparently. A flicker of amusement passed through his eyes. Perhaps. The room fell into silence. Then, without thinking, she whispered, I want a wish. Azar's stance tensed. Choose wisely, Layla. She closed her eyes, inhaling deeply before opening them again. I don't want riches or revenge. I just want to be free from this pain. I want to stop feeling like I'm drowning in my past. Azar studied her for a long moment. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he lifted his hand. A warmth spread through her chest. Not fire, not light, but something deep, something that untangled the knots of hurt buried inside her. The weight she had carried for so long began to lift. She gasped, clutching her chest. What did you do? I took away the pain, he murmured. Not the memories, not the lessons. But the wound no longer bleeds. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the strange, unfamiliar feeling of peace. Azar stepped closer, lowering his voice. You are unlike any master I have served, Layla. And for the first time in years, she felt something stir inside her. Something dangerous, something impossible. Hope. Days turned into weeks, and Layla found herself drawn to Azar in ways she couldn't explain. He wasn't just a djinn bound by magic, he was something more. Someone who understood her pain, someone who listened without judgment. Their late-night conversations stretched until dawn, filled with laughter, unspoken confessions, and quiet moments where words weren't needed. She knew it was dangerous. He wasn't human. He wasn't meant to stay. But logic had no place where the heart was involved. Azar, however, remained cautious. A djinn and a mortal cannot exist in the same world, Layla, he reminded her one evening. Then why does it feel like we already do? She whispered back. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The way he looked at her, like she was something fragile yet powerful, said everything. Layla had kept Azar a secret, guarding their strange connection like a sacred thing. But secrets had a way of slipping through cracks, and hers did in the worst possible way. One night, in a moment of misplaced trust, she told her best friend, the same friend who had once betrayed her with her husband, about Azar. It wasn't meant to be a confession, just an offhand comment about an ancient lamp she had found. But greed, once awakened, never sleeps. Within days, her ex-husband showed up at her door, uninvited and smug. Heard you found something valuable, he said, stepping inside like he still belonged there. Layla's blood ran cold. Leave. Come on, Layla. We both know you don't deserve something that powerful. His eyes flickered past her, searching. Where is he? Panic surged through her. I don't know what you're talking about. He smirked. You always were a terrible liar. Before she could react, her so-called best friend entered behind him, holding something in her hands. The lamp. Layla lunged forward, but it was too late. A sharp whisper of foreign words filled the air, and within seconds, the room was flooded with a familiar blue mist. Azar materialized, his expression dark as his golden eyes landed on the two intruders. His stance shifted, power crackling at his fingertips. But then, the smirk on Layla's ex-husband's face widened. I wish for complete control over you, Azar, he said. Layla's heart stopped. Azar's body tensed as invisible chains wrapped around him. His jaw clenched, his fists curled, but he couldn't resist. The words had been spoken. The wish had been granted. Layla's world tilted. He was no longer hers. Her ex-husband turned to her with a victorious grin. You always had a habit of giving your heart to the wrong men. Azar's face was unreadable, but his eyes held something she had never seen before. Regret, helplessness, and something far worse.
Goodbye.
Layla stood frozen as Azar lowered his gaze, his power no longer his own. The weight of betrayal crushed her chest, but there was no time to grieve. She had to fix this. Her ex-husband and former best friend wasted no time. They tested their new power, making selfish wishes, wealth, influence, status, but none of it satisfied them. Layla watched as Azar obeyed, his golden eyes dull, his movements mechanical. It wasn't just control they had taken from him, it was his very will. She refused to accept it. Late that night, while they celebrated their stolen fortune, she slipped into the room where Azar stood motionless. His face was calm, but she could see the silent torment beneath it. "I'm getting you out of this," she whispered. His lips barely moved. "It is done, Layla."
"No," she hissed.
"There has to be a way." He exhaled slowly. "Only one. Their final wish must be spoken. Only then will I be released from their grasp." Layla clenched her fists. She had to outplay them. The next morning, she walked into the grand living room where they lounged in luxury. Feigning curiosity, she leaned in. "You know, you could be even more powerful," she murmured to her ex-husband. "Azar's magic is limitless. You're thinking too small." Greed flashed in his eyes. "Go on." Layla smiled. "Wish for it. Wish for power beyond imagination. No limits, no rules." His arrogance made him blind. He turned to Azar, giddy with self-importance. "I wish to have the ultimate power, stronger than even you." Azar's eyes met Layla's. Understanding flickered between them. "As you wish," Azar said. A crack of energy split through the air, and the moment the wish was spoken, the chains binding Azar vanished. He straightened, his presence shifting back to something ancient and untouchable. Her ex-husband barely had time to react before his body was engulfed in the very magic he craved. He had wished for power greater than a Jinn's, but no mortal could contain it. His own greed consumed him. Layla's former best friend screamed, scrambling to grab the lamp. But it was too late. Azar lifted his hand, and with a single breath, they were gone. Not dead. Not harmed. Just erased from this story, as if they had never mattered at all. Silence settled between them. Azar turned to Layla, his expression unreadable. "You freed me," he said softly. She nodded. "You saved me first." Something unspoken passed between them. But they both knew the truth. He didn't belong to this world, and she could not follow him into his. Azar reached out, his fingertips barely grazing her cheek. "Your heart will love again," he whispered. "That is my last gift to you." Then, with a final, lingering look, he vanished into the wind. Layla stood alone, but for the first time in years, she was not broken. She was free.